Isold Cody, good morning to you. Isold's been in touch wondering why the hell Manchester United fans are not turning on the multi-million-pound players for the lack of playing for any manager. Like, it's just a fact.
I think there's a point. I think there's definitely a point in that, and I think it's probably just indicative of the culture that we thought, or maybe Manchester United fans thought they were immune from, which is the idea of turning on the manager. Like this was a really, I'm talking about this in the past tense as if he's already out the door, but this was a really interesting experiment in how deep one's loyalty can actually run for a manager, because as we all know, it is the first thing that will leave when it comes to your loyalty for the manager. It's the easiest thing to fix. It's the first person you'll turn on. Whereas Solskjaer was a very interesting case study in how long will the United fans actually stick with this guy, because they love the guy, and that's totally understandable. And last year, when he did well for a period of time and did get the club to a place where it looked like they might contend for a challenge, there was like real adoration for the guy, and it would have been really interesting to see what a full Old Trafford would have been like during those empty stadium months. Whereas now, I think actually it's kind of proven that no matter how loyal you are to your manager, or no matter how much you love your manager, it will still be the manager you call for at the end of the day, because that is just a condition of the sports fan and the condition of the football fan. The manager will still be the guy that gets scapegoated, even though you try your best not to say, let's shoot Bambi here. Bambi's always going to get shot, and that's going to be the grim reality in a couple of days. But I'd agree with that. I think the players definitely have questions to answer as well, but I guess you can't just cancel a lot of playing contracts, whereas you can just pull out the rifle and shoot Bambi.
Is that what happens in the end, is it?
I actually have never seen Bambi, but
people always use that example. And
it's Bambi's mother that gets shot at the start.
Oh, right, okay.
Spoiler. And apparently it's just
does Bambi get shot at all?
It's just a grim realisation of being an orphan for the rest of the movie, apparently, is what Bambi's all about.
Okay, so Bambi himself or herself?
Herself, isn't it? Bambi's
doesn't actually get shot.
I don't think so. I'm sure that there are poachers out there looking for Bambi, trying to kill Bambi.
Are you still doing that podcast, looking back?
No, we're not. Sue's on maternity leave. Congratulations to Sue, Team OTB, new arrival this week, by the way.
Yeah. We'll leave the Bambi chat there, but if anybody can clarify that, like the same way that you Wikipedia what Adrian and Gara was, if somebody could let us know.
We did credit this earlier. The Bambi thing is not an OTB analogy. It was in the Times, isn't it? So that's not our bit.
It's off used. I do think that we had our own Bambi situation, and we would like a different version of it, and definitely a more extreme version of it with Steve Staunton, where like he was beloved by the nation, but at the same time, there comes a point where you just got to go, this ain't working out, and no matter how much we love you, Steve, you got to go. And I do think that like hardened United fans are there now with Solskjaer.
Yeah, and like I mean, it's an interesting one. The Staunton one didn't really feel like that there was ever any sort of period of, you know, we had to stick loyal by this guy, and we've got to put on our green tinted spectacles here, in the way that maybe some Manchester United fans have had their red tinted spectacles on over the last couple of years. Maybe there's more of a rootlessness within the Republic of Ireland fan base than there is within the Manchester United fan base.
Shane Keegan, good morning to you.
Lads, how are you getting on?
Are there legitimate comparisons there with I mean it's a different, very different dynamic, but the Steve Staunton comparison?
I can see the angle that you're coming from, all right. Yeah, it does make sense, all right, but yeah, it's possibly also looking like it makes sense in two managers very, very much out of their depth. I mean, look, I know that this has kind of been thrown out there before, but if any of the other top clubs in Europe, if the managerial position became available and if Solskjaer was available to go and get, would they go and get him? And sure, look, obviously we all know the answer is no, and the reason he's got the job is because what he did at the club as a player. But to be honest with you, I'm amazed it's gone this long. You know, when he came into the role at first, I look, like most people, I would have thought this is a strange appointment. I can't see it working, but he's had his peaks and his troughs, and he seems to just come out of a trough at the right time, just when the trigger is loaded, as has happened on a few occasions so far. But it's definitely it definitely looks like it's getting closer to the end for him at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like I think if you're a dreamer as well, right? Because I think like obviously the Atalanta game was there as if you wanted to use it as evidence of, you know, maybe this thing could work. And then everybody was going into the Liverpool game, and I know we were talking about it last week, and it was like a case of, well, you know, if United turn up, the possibilities were United edge a win, Liverpool edge a win, or Liverpool thump them. They were the possibilities, and you know, people were willing to engage in the conversation that United might actually get something out of the game. But it may be, Shane, a case that the owners particularly, or the chief executives at the club, are looking at it going, let's be absolutely sure. Are we sure yet? And I mean, the evidence of last weekend, everybody's surely certain now that this is the end. Yeah, and look, I think the reality of the situation, like, you have to look at, how do these things actually play out? And the reality of the situation is no club, any decent club really, but certainly no club the size of Manchester United should be making any decisions without having what's next fully planned out in the background and ready to rock. And that has to be going on at the moment. You would imagine that surely has to be going on at the moment, that certain people are being weighed up and they're trying to find out what, be it, Conte or whoever, the various different names that have been linked with it. Are they interested? Are they gettable? What's the financial package that's going to be required to get them? What's the financial package that's required for Solskjaer to leave his role? You would think all of that stuff is going on in the background at the moment. And I would think it's the sort of thing that probably doesn't take any longer than a week or two. If they are talking to Conte, could 2 good results in those 2 games save his job? Possibly. But we may be talking about a decision that's already made and we're just waiting for the timing and stuff to play out. It's interesting this weekend, lads, because, I'm a Spurs fan. You've got 2 clubs who are far from setting the world alight really at the moment. So you have, and it's actually amazing when you look at the league table. You expect to see the 2 of them a bit further down the table, to be honest with you. They've been so poor and there's so much doom and gloom around them that you expect to see them almost in the bottom half. But I suppose because there's so much kind of teams beating each other at the moment, they're actually, neither of them are a million miles off. And I'll tell you what, the worrying thing again for Solskjaer is, you look at it and you go, okay, well, where are United at the moment? United are in a very, very similar position to where Chelsea were when Chelsea pulled the trigger on Lampard last year. And we all know how that played out.
And also, as you mentioned, the expectation that they would be lower down the table, it almost incentivises Manchester United to act now, because the season has not been a disaster. If you look at the Premier League table, there's still very much a couple of wins and they're back into the top 4. Just on Conte, Shane, having done a good bit of analysis on the team and the players and their setup last weekend, what sort of a job would Conte do with this group of players at his disposal in the short term?
Yeah, I'd be really, really interested to see it, because the first thing, again, is what, as I keep calling it, kind of the unsolvable headache, which is Pogba and Ronaldo. And I don't know, like with any team and with any player, you're trying to come up with a system that no system is or no set of players are perfect, but you're trying to come up with a system that accentuates the positives and tries to limit the negatives. To be fair to Solskjaer and whoever comes in, I'm struggling to figure out how you go about setting this group of players up to get the most out of them, because when Pogba's in the middle of the field and Ronaldo is up front, they look so open. Obviously, we've done the bits on, you've done bits and I've done bits on the lack of pressing and just how poor the press is, and then the massive holes in the middle of the field. Like it's said, that Tory Tielemans, it was just ridiculous how much Tielemans flourished the weekend before for Leicester when he came up against Pogba. And so what do? You drop the 2 of them? Well, I mean, we saw when Pogba got dropped against Atalanta, and you were back to McTominay and Fred as your centre mid pair, and that just looked so pedestrian, so slow, so lacking in creativity. It really is a serious headache to try and come up with a system. I know he very briefly, well, not very briefly, he gave it maybe 45 minutes. No, sorry, Pogba got sent off after about 15 minutes, didn't he? He started the second half at the weekend with a diamond, which was something that he tried before, and maybe that's the way to go. Is that a system worth having a look at that might get the most out of those 2 players? But look, Conte will come in. If Conte came in, he would come in and he'd certainly wave a big stick. I think that's his approach. But I mean, again, how are those 2 players going to react to somebody coming in and barking at them?
Can I ask you one more on Solskjaer, just as separately from United almost, and about your analysis piece on the 42 this week, Shane, the flaws of their lack of effective pressing, how easy it was to bypass that United midfield, and the lack of effort, I suppose, at its most basic level from some of the Manchester United players. Like, surely Solskjaer and Kieran McKenna and Carrick are looking at, like, they're not naive enough to know that that's not happening. So why does it happen?
Well, first, I think I'd say on it, Adrian, is it's it's almost not a lack of effort. It's fake effort. It's this, you know, if I tear in on top of that fullback and the crowd can see me tearing in on top of the fullback, well, they'll think I'm trying and they'll cheer me on. And it ends up, that's completely the opposite to what they want. Like it wasn't so much that they weren't pressing the other day. It was that they were pressing at the completely wrong times. They were pressing in ones and twos. They were pressing with Mason Greenwood in particular, pressing at completely the wrong angle. Running in on top of a player when their out ball was just so simple, where actually shuttling across the line a little bit and now approaching him a little bit slower while cutting off the angle, as Firmino was continuously doing for Liverpool, which was highlighting it all the more, was the major problem. In terms of how do you fix it on the training ground, again, I don't know how you can with your starting point being Ronaldo, because as people are people, and it doesn't matter what level you operate at. If you've got a fella in your side who wants to do his own thing and is going to do his own thing, nobody at this stage of his career is going to get Ronaldo doing something that Ronaldo doesn't want to do.
Just
and
on,
that's what I'm saying.
On that, Shane, just like if I'm Solskjaer reading your piece, right, and I'm like, yeah, Shane, I know, I can see that, but do you know what I mean? Like, what's
Exactly.
the but for him in that conversation when he's sitting down with his bosses?
The but is I've tried to get him to do that. I've told him that's what I want him to do, but you know, and maybe on the training ground he is making a bit of a burst at it. And look, I suppose the other thing as well is quite often how the game is going will very, very much affect Ronaldo's application and work rate. And the more the game got away, the more Ronaldo downs tools. If United had got off to a good start, you know, like I know it might seem small margins, but if United had a brilliant chance after 2 minutes, really, really fantastic chance at the start of that game after 2 minutes. If United score that game or score that goal, all of a sudden Ronaldo's chest is out a little bit, Pogba's chest is out a little bit, and all, now maybe they do want to hassle and harry a little bit more. Maybe they do want to work a little bit harder. You know, but you're not going to get it on a consistent basis from them. Absolutely not.
Is that then a new departure from Cristiano Ronaldo's perspective, Shane? This sort of downing tools, we're losing, we're getting hammered here, there's no way back. Like, I mean, we've all seen in Ireland just how well able he is to drag his team back into a game, and he doesn't get to where he is in the all-time standings of goal scorers and greatness, genuine greatness, by being somebody who downs tools after being a few goals behind. Is this one of the first times you've seen him act like that and show that sort of attitude?
I think previously he's found himself in setups where the rest of the collective were willing to put in the work rate that allowed him to just kind of hang around and do his thing. I'm not sure if that hunger is there for everybody to cover for him, and I'm not sure if they're at this moment in time well enough organised or well enough set up. I mean, it's hard to play without the ball with effectively 9 players, but really, really good teams can do it. You know, I'm trying to put myself in his shoes again. Back during my period, say when I was with Wexford, we had a guy at Wexford who scored 30 goals in 27 games in the season that we won the first division. All right, absolutely phenomenal return. But I don't think he'd even mind me saying he wouldn't have been the hardest working guy in the world now. He really, really wouldn't, you know. But a phenomenal finisher. But the rest of the team, particularly his kind of strike partner, the closest guy to him, they were kind of saying, well, listen, you're doing your job. We'll cover for you. We'll do the rest back here, and we'll work our socks off, and we'll try and set ourselves up in a way that just allows you to stay there and let us worry about getting the ball to you. And look, we're talking about infinitely different levels between what I'm talking about there and the level that they're at. But at various different degrees, that can be done if everybody else buys into it. And obviously it requires that star man continuously producing. Because for me, he never went 2 games in a row without scoring a goal. Nobody ever questioned whether it was worth sacrificing themselves for this. It seemed to always be worth sacrificing yourself for this system to work. What United maybe need a run, lads, of 3-4 wins in a row where Ronaldo does nothing but continuously scores the winner for them. And then everybody else says, you know what? Okay, let's do this. Everybody else sacrificed their game. And we set up in a system that just gets the most out of him, which then gets the most out of us. But there's 2 or 3 individuals within that side. To be fair to them, the likes of Bruno Fernandes, you can definitely understand. Hold on, I've been phenomenal for United here since I arrived. Why the hell am I going to sacrifice my game here? And you can definitely be sure Pogba is thinking that way.
That's very interesting. And I wonder then, is there not so much a counterpoint to that, but maybe another reason on top of that as well, where there's maybe a little bit of social loafing going on within the United dressing room, like the Leonardo Bonucci comments in The Athletic have been regurgitated on the BBC this morning, actually. And for anybody who missed this, he was speaking about playing with Ronaldo at Juventus. He said maybe it was taken for granted that if we gave the ball to Cristiano Ronaldo, he'd win us the game. But Cristiano needed the team as much as we needed him. There had to be a trade-off, because it's the team that lifts the individual, even if the individual is the best player on the planet. So does that come into things a little bit, like borderline complacency there, Shane?
Yeah, you would think so. Again, you know, Ronaldo, if the team were willing to sacrifice for him, he has to be absolutely effusive in his praise of his teammates, and that is something that I have seen, particularly with Portugal. He does tend to be quite good at making sure that the water carriers, for want of a better way of describing them, do feel appreciated. You'd wonder how that dynamic works in the dressing room. Again, just to, I suppose, to stay on the same point that I was trying to make, I would have continuously trying to be saying to Danny Furlong, Danny, that you need to let everybody know how much you appreciate the effort and the work that's been put in here. And, you know, maybe if Ronaldo was continuously coming out after it and saying, you know, I only scored because of this, I only scored because of that, that will work with certain personality types. Again, is it going to work with Pogba? Pogba doesn't need Ronaldo blowing up his ego. Pogba's ego is big enough without it, kind of a thing, you know? Well,
one other question I have, Shane, is it possible to win any trophy of significance in modern football without having a good pressing game? Is it possible to just sit back and change your approach without the ball?
Well, you see, again, pressing, people automatically jump to the assumption when you talk about pressing that pressing has to happen from the front. And it absolutely doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. So long as everybody knows what the triggers are and where the press is going to happen. So you say, is it possible to win a trophy? I know we're going back a couple of seasons now, but it's not that far back. I mean, Leicester were the kings of it. Leicester were the absolute kings of it. Let's be reasonably docile here in the first third of the field. Second third of the field, okay, we'll start to create the picture that we want. We'll start to send them in the direction that we want to send them. Now, by the time they're coming into the final third, like, it might, you know, that's a completely different kind of press, but it was tremendously effective. And what it meant now was that you were left with maybe 2v2 in the other half of the field, or Mahrez kind of in a half and half role. So you can, but it is still a press. But you don't have to be Liverpool. You don't have to be doing it the way that Liverpool are doing it. As I said, they give it an absolute exhibition in a high tempo pressing from the front. But you can go about it in different ways. And I suppose, again, lads, I suppose that's the one point I didn't raise there is what triggered this change in approach from United the other day? Because to be fair to Solskjaer, the Leicester approach seemed to be an approach that they were reasonably good at, where they didn't overly press, didn't try and press in the attacking half of the field, let the opposition come onto them and counter-attacked. And that seemed to be his big game approach and was working reasonably well, definitely a hell of a lot better than the new approach that they took the other day. Maybe is it coming from we're at home and the fans are on my back and they have to see us being proactive?
Yeah. It's making sense, because like that Manchester City game earlier in the was it New Year's Day? It really comes to mind when Anthony Martial turned into the Hulk. Like, it was just incredible. And I think that's probably, like, there's been a lot of, you know, people eating humble pie supposedly after the game, predicting that United might have done something in the game. But that was based on a decent amount of evidence where, as you say, they had this counter-attacking game where they could cause teams like Liverpool problems, which makes the whole thing even more extraordinary.
Yeah. As I say, there was no way you could have predicted that was the approach that United were going to take the other day. You know, any of the kind of tactic, your Michael Coxes or your tactical gurus of the world who would have been looking at how are United going to go about this, there is no way they would have predicted that they would have come into it. So you'd like to know, right, what, you know, I'm sure Solskjaer will brings his management team into an office. You know, it's the build up to a game. First day of the new week, right, lads? What way are we going to go about this? That'll then set the agenda for what they're going to work on the training ground over the course of the week. You'd love to hear the audio of how that conversation went and Was it Solskjaer's idea? Was it Mike Phelan's idea? Was it McKenna's idea? Who thought that this was a good idea to send out fellas who are reluctant to press in the case of a few? To be fair to Mason Greenwood, because earlier in the season I actually one of Ronaldo's first games, I think it might have been his very first game against Newcastle, I watched Mason Greenwood, and his effort and work rate was excellent. And he actually reminded me that day of a bit like the way Wayne Rooney used to cover for Ronaldo. He was kind of getting across and pressing in the central area for Ronaldo and was still sprinting out the wing. So I feel he does have the want and the willingness. It's just his decision making is horrendous as to when to go and the angles to go at. But going back to it, that conversation in that Solskjaer's office that day, how they thought that this was the right approach to take was a really, really strange one for me.
We've kept you away over time, but just before we let you off, so this weekend they open up against Spurs. They show great width and desire and accurate pressing. Sancho comes into the team. What happens, Shane? Is it what's going to happen this weekend? It's El Sacco, I think everybody's calling it. So who's getting sacked?
Yeah. Look, I think, to be fair, as I say, as a Spurs supporter, I think it's a good game for United. I do think it's a good game for United. Spurs have looked very, very poor, particularly going forward. I saw a table the other day, I think Spurs are third last for clear-cut chances created this season, which is probably exactly what United need right now, is somebody that isn't going to really, really test them from that perspective. I think it'll be a really cagey one. I find it hard to believe that this will be a high-scoring one. Both managers, because of the situations they're in, are likely to take cautious approaches, I would have thought. I think the big one for Spurs, obviously, is going to be Harry Kane. He has shown signs of coming back to some sort of decent form. If he was to click at the weekend, that would be the worst timing possible for United, and it's very possible that could well happen. And if he does click, I think Spurs possibly could win the game all right. But I'm just interested to see every week at the moment, lads. I'm opening an app on my phone at 2:00, just having a look to see what way are United going about this. Because for all the criticism, to be fair to him, if I was in his shoes, I have no idea what way I'd go about it at the moment either.